again with World Crisis Radio, Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. Now, on Tuesday of this week, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, the former bailiwick of Tiny Tim Geithner, currently the Secretary of the Treasury, issued a statement about the famous issue of the unwinding of the American International Group, AIG, derivatives last November. And as you know from listening to these broadcasts, this is a big, big scandal. It's probably the biggest. It's enough to bring down Geithner, and indeed should. AIG has received $180 billion of U.S. taxpayer money, and some of that money even went to foreign banks. Now, here's the news. Last November, AIG was negotiating with its derivatives partners, and these again are the $3 trillion of credit default swaps issued by that infamous AIG hedge fund, AIG Financial, in London, totally deregulated. So again, it's that classic combination, deregulation. Derivatives had been illegal. They were, of course, made legal by the free marketeer, stupid Reagan. And then with the help of the other free marketeer, Alan Greenspan, and the free marketeers, Phil Graham and Wendy Graham, and the wonderful free marketeer Rubin, they then became pervasive like cancer in the entire financial system. $3 trillion of derivatives. So now as AIG collapses, goes into implosion, reverse leverage, November 2008, about a year ago, the big question is, will AIG pay 100 cents on the dollar to the foreign derivatives bandits, or will it get a write-down? And here's the idea. At the time that this was going on, AIG was facing $32.5 billion in extra money that it owed partner banks, counterparties, as they say in the world of derivatives, $32.5 billion of credit default swaps above all. The goal of AIG was to cut that by 40%. Now, this, since it's $32.5 billion, 40% of that, or cut it to 40%, that would get you down to, well, you'd be saving $16 to $18 billion. Some reports say that the actual savings would have been $13 billion. But you get the idea. A hefty chunk of change, more than enough to fund something like WIC benefits or food stamps for most of the country for the best part of a year. WIC, you could probably fund 3 or 4 years of WIC with that kind of money. So here's what happened. In effect, AIG had come under the control of the New York Fed because of the bailout. At that point, AIG wanted to cut the $32.5 billion in half or more, and they were told no. Tiny Tim Geithner, the head of the New York Fed, came in and ordered AIG to make full payment on the basis of the fact that AIG had received a massive government bailout. AIG was deprived of all leverage, all ability to negotiate with the foreign counterparties, because they had been saved from bankruptcy. And the argument is, according to the Fed, that the foreign creditors of AIG were barred by their own governments from accepting partial reimbursement unless AIG were facing bankruptcy. So once the U.S. authorities bailed out AIG, there was no more bankruptcy threat, and AIG, meaning now you, the taxpayer, had to cough up the money to these derivatives bandits, hyenas, jackals, and pirates. Who got the money? Goldman Sachs got $14 billion domestically. We also know that Deutsche Bank got $8.5 billion, and we know that similar sums went to Union Bank of Switzerland, Societe Generale, Barclays Bank, and I think one or two Dutch banks also got involved. So this is approximately $35 billion U.S. dollars that were paid to derivatives bandits, jackals and hyenas, using taxpayer funds. Now, the full story of this has not, according to you from an article in the Washington Post here, Wednesday, October 28th. Bloomberg and others are trying to get the full details of the meetings, calls made to and from Geithner. A U.S. district judge ruled in favor of Bloomberg in August, but the Federal Reserve is appealing to keep it all secret. They want to keep all of this information sealed. And, of course, Senator Dodd of Connecticut, fighting for his life in Connecticut, is now trying to get this information made public. But there's a real eye-opener. It's time to impeach Geithner. Don't wait for any more information. We know enough. He shoveled approximately, by my count, 18 billion U.S. dollars, taxpayer dollars, out the window into the hands of Goldman Sachs, Barclays Bank, Union Bank of Switzerland, Societe Generale, Deutsche Bank, and those Dutch institutions. That is a scandal of the first water, and that we will continue to follow. That's nice to audit the Fed, but why not start with this? This is now the cutting edge, the derivatives contracts, the payments to foreign banks. That's the edge. Now, let's look at the financial situation. We've got the, as I'm turning to this now, Dow minus 241 here on the Devil's Night afternoon. So that cancels out the previous day. The previous day had been the best day for the Dow in 3 months. It had gone up almost 200 points. And that was in response to this hoped-up, massaged figure that the U.S. economy had grown, they claim, at a rate of 3.5% in the third quarter. Now, we know what GDP is worth. It's worth nothing. That contains all kinds of financial fluff, financial services, stock jobbing, derivatives manufacturing, and all other manner of economic crimes are included in the GDP. And it's also the case that there has been some success of these very minor government stimulus programs that have contributed. And the right wing, the reactionaries, of course, are screaming that these programs are bad. This is simply the anti-government obsession of these right-wing anarchists who call themselves conservatives. Conservatives, they are not. They're right-wing radicals. They're extreme reactionaries, the Limbaughs, the Hannitys, the Austrians, the Chicago boys, and so forth. Cash for clunkers and the $8,000 home tax credit have provided some stimulus. Imagine what you could do with a real New Deal recovery program of the type that I'm putting forward. You could do a whole lot. So this is now a blip. It doesn't mean anything. Just remember that the new unemployment claims this past week amounted to about 525,000 jobs lost. Now, those are counterbalanced by some people finding jobs, but the new unemployment claims, 525,000, still well over 500,000 per week. Now, Obama's claiming that he has saved or preserved 1 million jobs. What does this mean? This is basically 1 month's worth, and he's been in power now for 8 to 9 months. The big thing now, I think, though, is it remains the dollar. But let's just point to one other thing that set the stage for this past week. Capmark. We've talked about the coming of a commercial real estate crisis. We've talked about 500, 600 billion plus of commercial real estate mortgages that are coming due now in 2010, 2011, and how there's going to be a 50% default rate, bankruptcy rate on those foreclosures of important commercial properties in downtown areas. And remember, in the aftermath of the crash of '87, some years after that, you had Olympia and York, the biggest real estate company in the world, going bankrupt, right? The Reichman family. This time around, it was Capmark. Capmark blew on Sunday night, went bankrupt. This is about $200 billion in commercial real estate mortgages. So that crisis is now hitting. It is upon us. We'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio.